Alright, here's part two. Sorry this took so long. I didn't expect me to work this long on the saucer, but it was well worth it, you'll see. So here's part two of my Enterprise C build. Anyway, where I left off, the saucer was ready to go, right? Here you can see all the windows shining through my little lamp in my workspace. So anyway, after all that, I did my final light blocking inside with my shiny white, my gloss white coat, so light can bounce around there pretty well. And you can see here I have all the lights I'm going to use in the saucer section. That's it, nothing more. And next one is, well, they're all tinned and ready to go. All I need to do is touch with my soldering iron, boom, they're soldered into place. So let's start putting those light strips in. I put more in the bottom section because, well, there's more room and less windows, so yeah, and there's more windows on the top. Here I wired them all together, all in parallel. So on to the nav lights. Unlike the Reliant, these nav lights don't blink, they're stationary, which makes my job that much fucking easier. I wanted to try fiber optics this time. I didn't want to use SMDs because, well, there'd be a lot actually in the saucer section. So here you can see I drilled 2 holes in a 3mm green LED because I wanted 2 fibers coming out of that one. Then I glued in a fiber. Now you'll notice this fiber is bent at 90 degrees. Well, 2 questions you're asking. Why the fuck did you do that, and how the fuck did you do that? First one, why? Not much room in this model, right? So the saucer rim is pretty thin. I can't really put 2 big 3mm LEDs on top of each other because, well, that won't fucking work. And second, how did I do that? Well, I used a soldering iron. The soldering iron I just held into place with one hand, and I took the fiber and hovered it over the tip of the soldering iron, not touching it. Do not touch the iron, you will melt it directly, right? So it's just hovering above it, and the heat from the iron slowly melts the plastic. Well, it doesn't actually melt; it softens it, and then gravity sort of makes the fiber optic bend. And you can bend it as much as you want, just about, and there will be a good transmission of light. You don't have to worry about bending the fiber optic too much. So that's how it worked, and it worked out pretty well, as you can see. So here are all the lights installed in the bottom of the saucer. Now you'll notice I put some shrink wrap tubing over the fiber optics and the LEDs because I didn't want any light transmission to come from the windows into the fiber optics and vice versa. Here is the effect. Looks pretty cool. Yeah, I got some light leaks around that rim, but don't worry about that. Here's some other cool shots of it. It looks like all the windows are lit. They actually are not all lit. There are a bunch that are not lit, but that's only more noticeable in low light and when, you know, you can actually see the windows not lit, right? Anyway, here's the top. The top had far fewer lights. You'll notice I put like a little spotlight and a flashing strobe on the back of the bridge. Here's a nice little light test of all of them working together. And here's another, well, not another, but here's a picture of the top of the saucer with the spotlight. The spotlight doesn't quite work out very well. The saucer sort of dips down at a sharper angle than I thought it would, so I would have had to put the hole a whole lot higher. It won't quite light the registry, but I guess it's the thought that counts, right? Yeah, so it looks pretty cool in my mind. I like the nav lights. They're coming in strong, and everything looks great so far. So here's another shot of the model in direct light. Now, the windows come in pretty strong, actually, but yeah, it'll be dubbed down with paint and crystal clear and all this other stuff, but the lights will shine through in low light pretty well. Here are a couple more shots of the saucer with that lovely spotlight that's just bleeding through and not really shining much. Oh well, it bugs me, but I'll get over it. So one last shot before I seal it up, and yeah, I mean fucking business when I want to seal this thing up. Look at all those clothespins and little clamps holding that thing down. I do not want this thing to move. I didn't actually glue it with styrene because I don't fucking trust it with all that paint inside there. I used epoxy. Epoxy dried in about a half hour till it was nice and solid, but I kept those clamps on there for the whole night to make sure. Anyway, while that was drying, I decided to mix some paints, right? Because I gotta paint this fucking thing. I have a couple pictures of the studio model that they used, and I mixed up a couple of blues I was going to use. and yeah, I think they match pretty close to what they had, well, at least what I printed. The instructions say like use flanker gray or flanker blue and all this stuff. I find it way too dark. It doesn't match the studio model at all. So here it is, all sealed up, and you can see those lovely scribe lines I put in there. It really makes this model come to life a bit better than what AMT would give you. Speaking of AMT, here I am putting in that giant ass seam around the edge of the saucer. Thank you so much, AMT. Anyway, primed it, sanded it, primed it, sanded it, put more putty, prime, sand, over and over and over. You guys know the drill. Anyway, did that. It actually got rid of some of the light leak around the saucer edge, but I still had to prime it anyway. So I primed the outside and I guess fixed all those light leaks and light bleeds, and it looked great. Nice and gray. A nice big gray saucer. Yeah. Anyway, here are all the paints I'm going to use. At least on the saucer. Well, I didn't actually end up using that Insignia yellow because the decals did that for me, but I used Euro Gray for the phasers, two kinds of blue, a pure white and an Enterprise C white that I made. I noticed in the studio model that the escape pods were a slightly different shade of white than the rest of the ship. It was actually a bit more of an intense white than everything else, so I figured the other whites were a bit toned down with a bit of blue, so that's what I did with that quote-unquote white. So yeah, I sprayed it all over with that Enterprise C white that I named it, and it looks pretty cool. Now on to the hard part, on to the masking. So this model is full of circles. There are no Orbital Dry Dock masks for these, or Aztec dummy masks for these, because I guess they figured we can make circles pretty easy, but it's really hard to do it out of rectangular tape. Some methods I've seen were using artistic tape that you could actually stretch and bend to go around curves, but the brand I have must be crappy or something because it leaves some awful nasty residue. I don't want to deal with that garbage. Next, another method I heard of, well, that I've seen, was actually, cutting the fucking curves yourself on tape, right? You could use a compass, you could use French curves, you could use protractors, whatever the fuck else you want. Time consuming, don't want to deal with that garbage either. Good thing I did the Reliant, and good thing that this thing has engraved panel lines, right? Engraved panel lines make this little trick I'm going to do possible. So what I did is I took some Tamiya masking tape, and I masked over what I wanted to mask off, right? You can see on the left side, the left tape is over the line I want to stop my tape at. Then I took my scribing tool. It's not really a scribing tool. It's the tool you saw me use to make those panel lines in the last video. That tool is a scribing tool in the machinist world, but in the model building world, I guess it's a really big sharp nail. So I guess I'll call it my big sharp nail. I used the big sharp nail and I scored along the tape on the panel line I want to mask off. And then I took my very, very sharp brand new hobby knife and I gently cut the tape. Right, careful not to cut into the paint. Right, I cut the tape, and well, I removed the tape, and it made a nice little curve of where I want it to stop, and it'll follow along the curves of the panel lines. So if the panel lines are in the right spot, then the paint should be in the right spot. Now, the trick with this is to not cut too deep. Right, you can hear the tape cut when you're cutting. Right, you can hear it very gently cutting when you cut. But if you pass over again and you don't hear the tape cutting, that means you're cutting into the tape and you should stop. Right, I've got a bit of practice with this on the Reliant, so I was a lot more confident to do it here. This method might not quite work for some people because they don't want to cut into the paint, and I don't blame you. It was a little nerve-wracking doing it, but since it was just one layer of paint over it, it wasn't so bad. When I did the second one, then I got a little bit nervous, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, so I gradually went around all the way around the bottom rim, well, the bottom saucer, I should say. And I used some blue masking tape to mask off the areas that didn't matter if I was, perfectly circular or not. Painted my first blue. Came out pretty well. Then I did the top. The top, there was only a little bit of spot that's white there, right? So I masked that off with the same method of, with my big sharp nail, and then using my knife to cut along it, right? Then I masked off and did the second blue, right? And the second blue came out pretty well, in my opinion. Don't want to show you the results quite yet because, well, I want to do the phaser strips next. Now, the phaser strips were Euro gray. That was a little easier to do. They were smaller, didn't have to make as many cuts into masking tape, so it was a lot faster to do, and boom, there you go. It looks nice. Here's the bottom, here's the top, and look at all that fucking masking tape I had to use to do it. Anyway, don't want to get into that. So all that's done. Lights look cool coming out of it. You'll see a bunch of shots in the day and the night, low light. I'll just let that run through for you guys, but it looks really cool for me. So now it's time for those pesky life pods. The saucer section has, well, not that many compared to the Enterprise D, but enough that I got annoyed doing them. It was too repetitive for me, and I got distracted by a paper model. And this paper model I made was a travel pod, and yeah, it came out pretty cool, actually. Paper models are actually pretty fun to do. A little different from styrene, but whatever. Anyway, I had to get these life pods done, and well, eventually I got it. Here they are, masked, ready to go. Well, at least the top. I did the bottom next. I guess you could say masking is sort of like sanding. Just keep on pushing and you'll get there, right? Just keep on doing it. So yeah, I got them all done finally. Painted on the pure white, right? So there's a little bit of a distinction between that white and the white that was on as the base coat. And you can see it came out pretty well, and you can see, if you look closely, you can see the tone difference between the white along the rim on the top and the escape pods, and also, well, the white on the rim on the bottom and the escape pods. It looks good to me. So anyway, I had to install the dome on the bottom, the sensor dome, because I was using that hole to support the model while I was painting it with some sticks. Time to plug that up with the plastic part, and decal time after I gave it a nice clear coat, right? The paint is glossy, but I made sure by spraying a coat of Future on it to ensure I don't damage the paint, and the decal will slide on it pretty well. So start off at the bottom, put the decals, not many. The registry I don't quite like underneath, mainly because the studio model, the font is different, actually, but I suppose the Polar Lights decals, they fit the size of the model. Whatever, fuck it. So next up are the windows. First things first were the windows that were off. These I filled in with Tulip Slick, this acrylic based paint. This is the black version. This is supposed to be used on t-shirts, and it's machine washable and it's dry, so it's sturdy stuff, but it can stain your model pretty easily if you're not careful. This requires a very, very, very glossy surface for this little method I used. Another reason why I had to put that Future coat. So the way I did this is I slopped some on a spare piece of styrene, and I used a paintbrush, a thin paintbrush, and I roughly dabbed it into the window port. I did about 3, maybe 4 at a time, because I didn't want this stuff to dry at all. So 3 or 4 at a time, and I used a damp paper towel. I use this blue shop towel stuff that doesn't leave any residue. So a damp cloth, not soaking wet, not dry, damp, and you gently wipe it away, similar to what you'd use with microcrystal clear, right? Gently wipe it away, give it a few wipes, and it should stay in the window perfectly, and it should work. The bottom windows, I didn't quite do it right, but the top windows I did right, so they look better than the bottom ones, but we'll get to that later. As for the windows that are on, I use the microcrystal clear, and well, that method is the method you guys should be familiar with. It's similar to what I just did with the slick, except instead of the paintbrush, I used a little plastic syringe that you feed children with, right? So the effect looks pretty cool, at least in the bottom. No more little twinkles from the lights inside, at least at the bottom, and everything looks good. Now on to the top saucer. So first things first on the top saucer are the decals. First I did the little red things next to the phaser strips. You can't really see them here. Then I did the registry. That was really satisfying to do. Looks pretty good. The font's the right size and everything fits pretty well. Then I did the little yellow thruster things on the side. Then I did the windows first. I wanted to do the windows before I did the sensor band around the edge. So here you can see my progress with the tulip going around the outside edge, and then everything is done. Then I used my microcrystal clear, and I did that on all the windows on there. Took about, with everything, it took about 4 hours or so to do this right. The microcrystal clear went pretty quickly. The tulip stuff, I can only go 4 or 5 windows at a time, so it took a little longer, but the effect is nice. No more twinkle. Everything looks great. I even put in a little video of showing that there's no more twinkle, but some of you may notice that there's one little twinkle when I went down with the camera, and to those of you that noticed that and might say, hey, you missed one, yeah, I noticed when I filmed it, and it's a good thing I filmed it, because then I noticed that twinkle and I fixed that one right away. So everything looks pretty cool. So all that's left now is to add that sensor band on the edge. So me being a moron, I forgot to take a picture of putting on the decals on the saucer rim, and I went straight for the dull coat picture. Here's the bottom, here's the top. You can see the sensor band there now. Everything went smoothly on this top saucer. No major complaints aside from, well, making those grid patterns on the edge. So yeah, that's about it. The saucer's complete. Everything's ready to go for it. Now it's on to the nacelles. I promise this next video won't take as long to make because the nacelles are not as big as the saucer, and I'm not going to fully paint them. I'm only going to prime them. I'm only going to paint them when I do the secondary hull. So the next video shouldn't take so long to make. And yeah, thank you for joining me on this video. And until next time, you'll see me turn this AMT pile of crap into the lovely Enterprise C. Thanks for watching.